Baltimore Ravens coach sent a strong farewell message to Jaire Alexander after his trade, and it was a powerful one. We talk about that and so much more coming up on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Ravens. Welcome into the show. I'm your host, Kevin Oestreicher of Ravens Wire, here with you on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thanks so much for being here today, making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. And thank you out there to all the everydayers, the first-time listeners. If you're somewhere in the middle, thank you as well. We have 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. And we're here on this Victory Monday. I'm claiming it as a Victory Monday. I know the Ravens, they got their win on Thursday, and we had a Victory Friday celebration. But hey, the Ravens still won this week, so we're having Victory Monday too. And we have a jam-packed episode in the first part of the show. The big news over the weekend, which we covered extensively over here, was the Jaire Alexander trade to the Philadelphia Eagles. And the Ravens coach, and Chuck Pagano, he had a very strong farewell message, but in a good way. So we'll talk about that in the first part of the show and the Jaire trade in general. In the second part of the show, we'll talk about Ravens trade talk and buzz heating up, more reports of what the Ravens could be interested in as the deadline approaches. It's tomorrow. It's coming up quickly. Then in the final part of the show, we'll dive into a status report, talk about the Ravens AFC North foes, how they fared on Sunday, as well as a little bit about their Week 10 game against the Vikings. So the Vikings, they shocked some people on Sunday. Want to tell everyone and remind everyone today's episode of Locked On Ravens is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you'll get $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. And yes, we did cover the Jaire trade a lot over the weekend. We had instant reaction episode. We had bonus episodes on both Saturday and Sunday, talking trade, talking Jaire. But just to kind of talk about that a little bit, because it does tie into some of the rumblings we're hearing still. Baltimore moved off of Jaire. You know, seems like they just didn't have a plan. They didn't trust them. And while I wish Jaire would have gotten a little more run in Baltimore, it just didn't work out with the training camp injury, his Buffalo game being awful in week 1, and then them trying to kind of get him into game shape, but him only playing one other time outside of Buffalo. So weird situation. Baltimore trades him in a 7th rounder for a 6th rounder. They have a plethora of draft capital, which all ties into itself, because the Ravens, I'm just going to say it right now, they do not need that draft capital. So, you know, I was pumped about that Jaire signing when it happened, and I'm bummed that it ended this way, but I'm sure Jaire wanted playing time, was a mutual decision. You know, Chuck Pagano, he talked a lot about Jaire, and he actually put out a tweet about the Jaire Alexander trade, which I think it was really cool from Chuck, because he's someone that, you know, a lot of people love and respect. And he ended up saying, quote, "We are going to miss you, Ja, a pro's pro and man's man. What a great example you were on how to handle a really tough situation. Your light shine bright every single day. Much love and respect." So again, Jaire handled this thing like a pro, right? I think that's a really cool thing here, because I'm sure it was a tough situation. Jaire being a healthy scratch and working his way back up and having it was a really weird situation, both for the organization and the player, I'm sure. And, you know, there are multiple ways those can be handled. Obviously, I think we saw both of those last season for the Ravens, with Deontay Johnson handling his and Eddie Jackson handling his not so gracefully, versus, you know, a guy like Marcus Williams, who I'm sure wasn't happy about his situation, but he did handle his with grace. And for Jaire, I give him a lot of credit for that. He will have an opportunity to play in Philadelphia. And look, I'm going to be happy for him if he does ball out, but I'll be a little bit upset and disappointed knowing it could have been in Baltimore, but clearly they didn't trust him. And if they didn't have a plan for him, I mean, he played, you know, a very minimal amount of snaps for this team. They clearly didn't trust him enough to put him out there. Baltimore's system right now, even the backup corners who are active and guys like Awuzie and Tampa aren't playing a bunch. But, you know, again, I need to give Jaire credit there, because, you know, he's someone that wears his emotions on his sleeve. He's very outspoken. He's not afraid to speak his mind, but, you know, he didn't have anything negative to say. He'll probably say something about it when he gets interviewed for the first time in Philly, right? And we'll kind of get that curtain peeled back a little bit, but he didn't make it into a distraction, which again, really, really awesome of Jaire to do that. So again, the value isn't really there in terms of like the player that he is, right? I mean, I still think he has top 10 corner potential when he's healthy, but of course, that's the asterisk with Jaire, right? It's when he's healthy. And so it clearly didn't come to fruition in Baltimore. And they're trading a 2027 seventh rounder for a 2026 sixth rounder. So it only adds on to their draft stash and their draft capital. But the Jaire deal in itself was something, and I said it on social media, right? If they're not going to use them, just trade them. I mean, you end up clearing up $2 million in cap space. The roster spot is now opened up. So there are a lot of different things that Baltimore can now do with that. And, they had cap space to begin with. Brian McFarland, Ravens salary cap, who, is an expert when it comes to the Baltimore salary cap situation. He outlined that before the Jaire deal, they had a little bit over $14 million in cap space. And so not all of that's going to be directly available for them to use for trade, because you have to look at future injury replacements potentially, like Brian notes, or weekly practice squad elevations, but those aren't substantial enough to, take the Ravens out of any potential trade situation. That's very minimal compared to, the actual money that is going to be available to them when it comes to the trade deadline tomorrow. So I feel like at this point, the Ravens, any cornerback depth is good cornerback depth. And if they had a plan to kind of ramp him up for January, keep him as healthy as possible, like that would have been one thing, but you would have had to play him on the field. And it was just kind of accumulating inactive. And, for a player who's as prideful as Jaire, that was probably tough for him. So I think Pagano's message was really awesome and shed some light on the player and the person more so of who Jaire was in that organization. And, that kind of attitude does rub off on the young guys, right? It does, leave a lasting impact on, hey, this is a vet who is competitive. He wants to be out there. He's not getting that opportunity, for a rookie, a second-year guy, a younger player. That message is impactful. And so it was unfortunate to see how some of those situations played out last year in Baltimore with Deontay Johnson and Eddie Jackson, but they've had a couple of really great examples of how to handle a situation like that in both Marcus Williams and Jaire Alexander. So shout out to Jaire, and I wish it had worked out in Baltimore. I wish he had gotten more of an opportunity so that we could see, and if it wasn't working out after that, you could have said, okay, yeah, it's time to move on. But the problem with Baltimore is, with the way their record is right now, they don't really have that time to put Jaire and see him make a game-ending mistake again and be like, oh, well, now it's time to move on, but he already cost you another game. Like, they didn't have that luxury. So, I mean, just unfortunate all the way around, but, you are losing a good cornerback piece. And that kind of leads us into, hey, well, what's going on with the rumblings in Baltimore right now with the trade situations? And we've heard from multiple people, Danny Rossini being one of them, who have reported that the Ravens are looking around at the cornerback market. And so if the Ravens do essentially add another corner to replace Jaire, it probably won't be the same level of talent that Jaire brings to the table, the same level of upside there. But I mean, if they trust the guy, they trust the guy. And that seemed to be something with Jaire where they just didn't feel comfortable putting him on the field for whatever reason, or he just was too far out of the defense or whatever it was. If they end up making a move for a corner, it will probably be a player that's just less talented than Jaire straight up. And that's not like disrespectful. I'm not trying to be disrespectful with that. It's just like, we know who Jaire is when he's healthy, right? We know who he is when he's healthy. The thing with the corner the Ravens could potentially bring in is, maybe they just wanted somebody who maybe they feel like fits their system a little bit better, or they feel like you can trust them to be out there in January. I don't know the situation, but we've heard that the Ravens are sniffing around that cornerback market. The other thing, and this came out on Sunday before the game started, the Ravens, we've heard they've been sniffing around defensive help. Insiders have kind of made that clear of like, okay, they're going on the defensive side of the ball. But Ian Rappaport narrowed it down a little bit to say that the Ravens, they remain interested in front seven additions. The Ravens are looking at front seven additions. So obviously that would entail just the basic definition. Front seven would be defensive linemen, outside linebackers, and inside linebackers. I don't think the Ravens are in the market for an inside linebacker. I think they feel pretty fine with what they have right now. Roquan Smith, Teddy Buchanan, Trenton Simpson, etc. But Obviously, the edge and defensive line have been the positions that we've been hammering home over the course of the last handful of weeks here for Baltimore, is they've needed guys to step up. And while we've seen flashes, it hasn't been as consistent as they have needed it to be. Like we've seen the Mike Green flashes come on in recent weeks, Travis Jones and Kyle Van Noy and whatnot, but they do need some more people there. And so to hear Ian say that, the latest insider report from Ian saying that the Ravens are looking at front seven additions, it continues to add on. These are the themes that are being formed right now. So I'm really interested to see, because I know we also, we on this show have talked about the offensive line with Kevin Zeitler. Cesar Ruiz has been someone who a lot of people are talking about right now as well over in New Orleans, but really feels like the insiders are getting word, or at least putting out there, that the Ravens are looking at those defensive additions, which it doesn't shock me whatsoever. And coming up in the second part of the show, we'll continue talking about those reports as well as trade targets coming into focus for not just the Ravens, but the entire league. So be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming your way here on Locked On Ravens.
Today's show is brought to you by our friends over there at Peloton. Look, folks, it's time to break through the busiest time of the year with a brand new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus that's powered by Peloton IQ. It's Peloton's most elevated technology and equipment yet that gives you real-time guidance, and it gives you endless ways to move, whether you want to work out by yourself or if you want to work out with your favorite instructor, like my personal favorite, Alex Toussaint. He always gets me fired up to tackle the day. And the thing I like about Peloton, it helps me achieve more in less times. They have features that help you plan, stay motivated, track your progress, and Peloton IQ also provides personalized workout plans and recommendations. That's something that I use right now during the busiest time of the year covering the NFL. They plan my workouts for me based on my mood, my vibe, and also my favorite instructors. So make sure you check it out and use it, because it also helps you correct your form in real time, and it maximizes your reps. It counts your reps so that you can do it smarter, safer, and more efficient. Let yourself run, lift, flex, push, and go. Explore the new Peloton cross-training Tread Plus at onepeloton.com.
And the show is brought to you by Supply House. When the opening whistle blows on a new repair, get your crew moving forward with Supply House. Order today and see parts on your doorstep tomorrow. Over 280,000 plumbing, HVAC, and electrical items from the most trusted brands in the business. Their real-time inventory and honest lead times keep you from punting projects, while their industry-leading customer service always has your blind side covered. Need parts fast for a project? Supply House has next-day delivery. Talk about a game changer. The part finder tools and 3D schematics can save you hours on jobs where every detail matters. Their Trademaster perks, like priority shipping and dedicated support, make the whole process smoother as well. Join the free Trademaster program today and score serious perks like priority shipping, lower prices, and a dedicated support line. Visit supplyhouse.com to sign up for free and use promo code SHNFL5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. Real people, real service. We're back here, our second segment of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher still here with you, talking Ravens football. Again, appreciate everybody for being here and making Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. We have 5 days a week plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Our regular show is Monday through Friday, 6 a.m. Eastern time. We also have instant reaction shows for pieces of big news like we did for Jaire Alexander over the weekend. Also have instant reactions after games. We have live watch-alongs during games where you can react with me to every single play. We have Locked On Ravens Squad show twice a week with myself, Sam Njoku, former Ravens receiver Kadri Ismail. That's actually coming up tonight. We're going to do an episode of that, 7:30 p.m. Eastern time. And then we also have bonus episodes over the weekend. So thank you for being here again. We talked about Chuck Pagano's strong message and strong words, very powerful, honestly, in my opinion, to Jaire Alexander, after his departure, essentially crediting Jaire for the handling of his situation and what he was kind of going through with the team. And again, I'm curious to hear what Jaire has to say about that when he's interviewed for the first time in Philadelphia. But the Ravens, again, they have a trade deadline to maneuver around, and they should stop being in the business of trading guys away. You got to start bringing guys in, right? Because that's what's going to help your team out come December, hopefully January, hopefully February, if they can get there. Still a long way to go, but we have identified, us on this show and everybody else who's looking at this team right now, there are pretty clear holes on the defensive line, edge, offensive line. And, we talked about the rumblings that have been put out there by Ian Rappaport and others about defensive help, corner help, front seven help, edge help. And we've heard it all. I mean, Albert Brie of Sports Illustrated talked about the edge help. I mean, it feels like the writing is on the wall there, but we also know that the Ravens like to throw curveballs. And it's not always, it's this report means that's going to happen. I mean, the Malaki Starks thing, when it was leaked that the Ravens really liked him, everyone thought, okay, this is just a smokescreen, because with the Ravens, usually when stuff like that gets leaked, it is a smokescreen. But the Ravens, they actually liked Malaki and they took him. So it's kind of thorough, because usually I'd say, all right, these are smoke screens. But I mean, the need is so obvious where, I mean, I don't think that they can be. Like, seriously, I think that the Ravens, I know defensive help is very broad. And you're like, okay, you're covering like 5 or 6 different positions there. But I mean, realistically, when you talk about the Ravens and what they need right now, well, I mean, you can talk about the edge room, and some trade targets I think have really become primary focuses for a lot of teams. And I'm sure Baltimore is in this conversation, but we've talked a lot about guys like Quinnen Williams and Dexter Lawrence and Jeffrey Simmons. And, we also did a lot of talk about edge guys like Kayvon Thibodeau, Jermaine Johnson, if Will McDonald is somehow available. Obviously, the team the Ravens just saw on Thursday night, guys like Bradley Chubb, Jalen Phillips, Matt Judon, like, listing off everybody that could be an option in Tennessee. Arden Key, Draymond Jones, Devondre Sweat, even. There have also been mentions potentially, and we're recording this before Monday night happened with the Cowboys and Cardinals, but Calais Campbell is a guy that I've had on my list for a while now. But Mazi Smith, the former first rounder for Dallas, apparently it's possible that he could maybe be involved in a deal. Now, does that mean he will be? It doesn't mean that, but it's possible. You also have a couple of other players that could be with interest to Baltimore. Obviously, offensive line wise, I talked about Kevin Zeitler and Cesar Ruiz. Those are the 2 guys that I feel like would fit Baltimore there. I don't know if the Ravens will make a change on the O-line. It would probably have to be a trade to kind of force that. But, it's interesting considering how many teams are also going to be in the market for edge help. I mean, the Bills just lost one of their edge defenders, and they're obviously dealing with the loss of Ed Oliver. So the Bills could be looking, and it's not just Baltimore, right? The Bills, like I just said, but apparently the Chiefs are in the market for a defensive tackle. The Lions want a defensive end. The Eagles could be looking to add another edge guy. The 49ers front 7 players. So the Ravens are going to have competition for these guys, but this is also the time where, and this has been talked about on different platforms by different insiders about how this is the time, day away from the deadline, where those players where you hear reports about maybe 2 months out, a month out, a couple weeks out from the deadline of, that player is untouchable. It's going to take a heck of a package to get them out of that situation wherever they are. This is the time where teams start to lower their asking prices, to come back down off of those high offers that they want. And because, again, if a player has, I don't want to say no value, but if a player doesn't make sense in a certain opportunity anymore, or a certain situation, I mean, you're going to have to trade him away, or else you're going to lose him for nothing. And if the contract isn't there, like, you have to weigh things as well, like comp picks. And that's something we were talking about with the Ravens of like, all right, well, if they trade away Mark Andrews, which again, they should not do right now, but if they were, and they were 1-7 or whatnot right now, and they were sellers, it'd be like, all right, well, if you trade Mark for a 6th rounder, he's probably going to get a 5th round comp pick back next year because of the contract. So that's what other teams are weighing as well. But teams just want to be able to go out there that are, teams like the Saints and the Jets and the Titans and all those teams, the Dolphins, they want to get assets back for these guys, for players like Bradley Chubb, moving off of the money, right? Bradley Chubb has an expensive contract. And so the Ravens would have to find a way to fit that under. As we mentioned with Brian, he said the Ravens have, before the Jaire trade, about $14 million. With Jaire, it's probably $16 million now-ish. That's enough where you can fit a big contract. And so it's not just about the Ravens kind of focusing in on one player and making that move. I would go multiple moves here. I've said that over and over again here on the show. I would go multiple moves, making sure that you are trying to plug up every single hole that you can. Because let's be realistic about this both ways. They have a realistic shot to, I don't want to say run the table, but to win a lot of games here over the next 9 weeks. And if you can get to that 10-7 threshold, and we'll get to this a little bit more in the final part of the show, I'd feel pretty good about them getting into the postseason, depending on, like they'd probably have to beat Pittsburgh twice in that situation or, get some help division wise. But the Ravens are in a good situation. You are not perfect, though, if you're the Ravens. I mean, look, the Ravens have beat up against teams like the Dolphins and the Bears, right? And the Bears are a team that that Cincinnati game. I mean, I'll tell you what, when the Ravens play the Bengals on Thanksgiving, Lamar and that offense might put up 70 on that defense with how bad they are. But we'll get to that in the final part of the show. The Bears, they're an okay team. They're not great, but they're not terrible either. The Dolphins are terrible. But we still saw some things they need to improve on. And part of that is just they don't have the personnel at certain positions. So I would, if I'm the Ravens, I would make a move. I would honestly trade away that second round pick. Is that for Quinnen Williams? Is that for somebody else? I'd trade away the second. If the player is right, don't just trade it away to trade it away. But maybe you could try to sneak Quinnen Williams for a third and a fifth, right? I'd send that in right now if I'm the Ravens. But it's not just about one of those, like I'd make a medium because there's not that like Max Crosby player available for the Ravens or like the Myles Garrett or like the Micah Parsons deal, right? That deal for Baltimore right now, that player is not available. I guess the closest thing to it would be Trey Hendrickson, but I honestly doubt since he moves on from him at this point anyway. So, and plus he's not getting traded in division. So that's just like, it's not even happening. But like that type of player I'm talking about, where if there was an equivalent to a guy who's been put in those conversations, and I'm not talking about Crosby because I don't think that's realistic for any team to get him right now, it'd be Hendrickson. But, I'd go after a Williams and then I'd go for a Zeitler and maybe a Kayvon Thibodeau. Like that'd be a perfect deadline for me. Quinnen Williams, Kayvon Thibodeau, and Kevin Zeitler. Now, is it realistic they make 3 moves? I'm not sure about that, but I think with moving off of Jaire, kind of the rumblings that we've heard about, because before they traded Jaire, I'm kind of looking at these reports and they're looking for a cornerback, and I'm like, yeah, you can never have too much corner depth, but you're already struggling to get a guy on the field or even on the active list to play with Jaire in the fold. So now that he is gone, I could see Baltimore doing that 1-for-1 swap again with a player that's less talented than Jaire overall, but someone that can, I guess, be trusted, is in that circle of trust, because it never really felt like Jaire made it into that circle of trust with the Ravens. Obviously he took a lesser deal to come to Baltimore. Lamar had a big influence in that and whatnot, it felt like, but it just didn't work. So it could be a corner as well, where I'm not just limiting my scope to, all right, we're just lasering in right now on only interior guys, offensively and defensively, front 7 players. With the reports we've been getting and with the Jaire trade, it is realistic that they do trade for another cornerback, but I would probably assume it would be on maybe at the level, maybe a little better in terms of player than Tre'Davious White was last year for them. I think that would be the kind of move that they make there, because I think if you're going to pour your capital into a position, like your big capital to make the biggest move you're going to make, it's not going to be corner for me. It's going to be on the interior. You can make a move and, because that Trey White trade, they gave up like nothing to get him. So I'm sure if you can get a guy in that you feel like you can trust, and, Trey White had a decent impact for Baltimore and limited snaps. I'm not saying go trade for Trey White now in Buffalo, but like someone of that caliber, maybe a little better, and you don't have to give up nearly anything. Yeah, sure. But the Ravens are projected to have 5 fifth-round picks this year. As I mentioned, that 6th-round pick they added is for this upcoming draft. They're projected to have double-digit picks again. They don't need to have double-digit picks in this draft. They didn't need to have double-digit picks in last year's draft. I was screaming it from the rooftops. They should not have taken 11 players in that draft. Not all of them are going to make the roster, and that is a waste of an asset to me, unless the guy just truly, truly is awful. There weren't enough roster spaces. And 2 guys, unfortunately, both corners were lost to injury. Those are really unfortunate situations. But then Garrett Dellinger also doesn't make the roster. So essentially 3 of your 11 draft picks aren't on the roster right now. 2 of them are still technically with the team that didn't make the roster. And Garrett Dellinger, I think, is still in Cleveland on the practice squad. But use those assets to your advantage to get guys in that can help, either if it's a Zeitler or a Campbell or one of those guys, for maybe a year, right? Or half a year. Those guys are probably going to retire after this year, or at the very max, probably after next season. But you can also use some of these other picks to get a guy, because like the Roquan Smith deal, these guys don't have to be rentals. Like if they traded for Jalen Phillips, they'd have to give him a new contract. But if he performs well, you'd feel comfortable in doing that, giving him the money that they clearly didn't want to pay Odafe Oweh, who, by the way, has 4 sacks in 4 games with the Chargers. So that's a win-win deal for both Baltimore and Los Angeles, considering how Louis Gilman has freed up this defense. And, always playing well in Los Angeles. So shout out to him. But if it's one of those guys like a Thibodeau or a Phillips that you feel like you can give that Oweh money to, and you feel comfortable and confident with that guy, then okay, that's a whole different conversation. So a lot of interesting tidbits. Again, we'll have you covered with any rumors, trades, and of course, we'll have a live show tomorrow after the deadline. We'll dive into if the Ravens made moves, if they didn't make moves, and we'll have all the Ravens trade content and coverage for you here on Locked On Ravens. Coming up in the final part of the show, we'll do a little status report. The Ravens didn't play on Sunday, but a couple of AFC North teams did. Plus, we'll look a little bit ahead to what the Ravens have on the docket, including Minnesota team. Looked pretty impressive on Sunday, so be sure to stay tuned. Plenty coming your way here on Locked On Ravens. This show is brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there's no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you missed the start of the game or want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. Keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. And for me, I'm a big Denver Nuggets guy. So for Denver, I like what they did in the offseason, and they're off to a decent start this year. And over on FanDuel, they have the second best odds to win the finals at plus 700 over on FanDuel. They're tied with the Cavaliers, and the only team ahead of them is the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are the defending champs. So I like that number a lot for Denver, but be sure you head over to FanDuel. Right now, FanDuel's giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Continuing on our final segment of Locked On Ravens, Kevin Oestreicher still here with you on this Monday. New week. Ravens back in action on Sunday against the Vikings, and appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Ravens a part of your day and your first listen each and every single day. And for everybody who tunes in, all the support, both in video form and in audio form. If you have a friend or family member who wants some daily Ravens coverage, be sure you send them our way over here on Locked On Ravens. And also you can follow me on social media at ChaosStriker34, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, the whole 9 yards. So let's do a little status report. We've talked a lot of trades. We've talked about Chuck Pagano sending a powerful message to Jaire, which again, I can't say enough good things about the way Jaire handled this situation based off what Chuck Pagano said. We talked about that, but let's dive into this status report here, because a lot of people, a lot of Ravens people, myself included, we're all looking at the AFC North games, and Colts were playing the Steelers. We talked about how the Ravens, their schedule, look at all these easy teams. They're not easy, but the schedule is softer. The Steelers, by the way, their schedule, well, it's a lot harder than Baltimore's. So there's a chance. And Pittsburgh plays the Colts, who had only lost 1 game all season. And then Pittsburgh decides to show up, and the Colts decide not to show up, and the Steelers actually win that game. Daniel Jones threw 3 interceptions on the day. Jonathan Taylor held in check, and the Steelers were able to get solid contributions from Aaron Rodgers, Jalen Warren, and they win that game. So Pittsburgh, instead of dropping to 4-4, and Ravens get a little closer, Steelers are 5-3. But in another game, and we kind of talked about it in the second part of the show a little bit, the Bengals, well, their season is probably over. They're 3-6 right now. They lost in a heartbreaking fashion again, this time to the Bears, 47-42. Joe Flacco is doing things that I have rarely ever seen a 40-year-old plus quarterback do at this point. And Flacco right now putting up 30 plus points a game. He's Jamar Chase, T. Higgins, everybody's feasting. That defense, though, is so terrible. And the vibes right now in Cincinnati are awful. So again, like I said, I feel like Lamar is about to put up like 70 on the Bengals defense, because look, I give a lot of credit to Joe and Jamar and T and Chase Brown and that whole offense for doing what they're doing. But as long as Zach Taylor is there, Duke Tobin, Al Golden, I could go on and on. That Bengals defense, I've been on the fire Zach Taylor train forever. As a Ravens person, I'm fine with cool. All right. Continue to go to Zach Taylor and have a terrible defense. I mean, I'll take it. The Ravens will beat you twice a year. It is what it is. That's fine by me. But the Bengals, the vibes are so bad. I mean, you have players like laughing when asked about the defensive game and saying, "Oh, ask me on Monday," and multiple offensive players speaking out on the defense with like really, really strong messages that are not like the strong message from Chuck Pagano to Jaire. That wasn't a good way. The strong messages I'm talking about for the Bengals to the defense, not good. Bad way. So it's going to come down to Baltimore and Pittsburgh. I don't care what Joe, I mean, I do care because I think it's really cool that Joe's doing that. I wish it was on a team that's not in the AFC North and isn't Cincinnati, but you got to respect greatness when it's coming and happening in front of you. And Joe is doing unbelievable things right now, but Joe can do whatever he wants, like we have seen him do in these past couple of games. And, team will find a way to put up more points than him. So I'm cool on Cincinnati for the rest of the year. I think they're going nowhere. It's going to be Baltimore and Pittsburgh, and we'll see how that goes. Baltimore is going to have to play a Vikings team in week 10. They're going to Minnesota. The Vikings, they end up beating Detroit, a game that everybody had Detroit winning. No one was Minnesota. No one's picking Minnesota, right? Well, no. JJ McCarthy with 14 completions leads this team to a victory. I mean, unreal. The NFL is really any given Sunday. So Minnesota 4-4 now. They have momentum heading into this week 10 game. They're still very inconsistent as a team. They have a lot of talent. Their defense is going to have their hands full with Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, etc. But if they can get to JJ McCarthy using the pressure they've been using, Kyle Hamilton roaming around, the chess match that's going to have to happen between Kyle Hamilton and JJ McCarthy, Roquan Smith and JJ McCarthy. That can be tough for, JJ is technically in his second season, but it's his first year starting. And, he's been the Carson Wentz show forever. I mean, McCarthy has barely played any games this year. So I do think the Ravens have an opportunity to really make a statement here against the Minnesota team. And hopefully it'll be a good game, but one the Ravens do win. So that's all I have for you here today on Locked On Ravens. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. On the way out, be sure to hit the like and subscribe button in video form and follow along in audio form for 5 days a week, plus more of daily Ravens coverage. Coming up tomorrow, we'll be diving into more Ravens coverage, trade rumors, reports, and a lot more. Plus, we'll have the Locked On Ravens squad show tonight. So be sure to stay tuned for that, and I'll see you right back here soon on Locked On Ravens.